If you think that you need to do this or that, you name it, to affirm that you are the person that you desire to be, or do this or that to deny the appearances that seemingly suggest you are not the person you desire to be, and find that although doing these things provides temporary relief from the suffering generated by the illusions of separation, you are not alone. I started this channel back in 2013. In 2017 and 18, I started to talk more about metaphysics. When I first started talking about particular chapters from the book Think and Grow Rich and The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And over the years, I've worked with thousands of people in the area of more so entrepreneurship, but also in personal life with respect to metaphysical concepts and ideas. Now, I've mentioned to those who feel this way, the way we just described, that these laboring in vain techniques are not required when doing these things can feel like they just perpetuate the illusion that you are not already that which you desire to be. And that is completely normal, as doing these things in an attempt to become that which you desire to be can also at the same time feel like you are suggesting that you are not already that which you desire to be. And this reflects as unnecessary mental, emotional, and physical resistance. And thus, I recommend what was stated in Matthew 6, 7, and 8. Use not vain repetition, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. So, what is the solution then? Well, I like how Joel Goldsmith had articulated it. He said, man, or the individual, is always seeking a power to overcome something or destroy something, and therefore he is not living in the awareness of God. Because in the realization of the presence of God, there is no need to overcome, to destroy, or to do anything. So again, very precisely, in the realization of the presence of God, which is that still I am presence, still I am, beyond these thoughts, beyond these appearances, beyond this world, beyond the emotions, being as I am, still as I am, that is the presence of God. That is the peace of God. That is the happiness of God. That is the bliss of God. That is the love of God. That is the fulfillment of God. That is everything that the individual could possibly ever need. And it is available now and always now, beyond appearances, regardless of this or that condition, regardless of whatever environment you are in. As he said, in the realization of the presence of God, there is no need to overcome, to destroy, or to do anything. So what practical benefit does this have for the individual? Well, I have seen this from my 21 years of applying this information and with working with individuals, thousands of individuals, and not just working with individuals directly discussing metaphysics in relation to their personal life, their business life, family life. Also infusing this, not necessarily using this kind of verbiage, but infusing it in the various consulting that I've done, in the various training and facilitation that I've run. For example, I used to teach these speed reading workshops on behalf of Iris Reading starting in 2010 while I was building my IT business. And although I did not use this kind of language or quote the Bible in the presentations, in the workshops, I did infuse in there. Consciously, I infused in there that by returning back to that still I am presence without telling them, I didn't say return back to that still I am presence. We return back to that still I am presence in flow. All I was doing was inwardly being still or returning back to that stillness. Why do I say return back to that stillness? Because in the earlier stages of running these workshops, I was reactive to the appearances. I was worried about what the students would be thinking. There was fear of criticism. There was doubt. There was uncertainty. Even though I know exactly how to teach these workshops. So what would happen was they would return into the flow. They would get into the flow. As I would get into the flow, they would get into the flow. Now the results would speak volumes. Their speed, reading speed, would increase. Their reading comprehension would increase. Their ability to retain the information would increase as well. And what was cool is they would find ways from all the things that we discussed in the workshop. That was their style, which can be a hybrid of what was taught, what they already knew, and whatever it is that they were doing or not doing was in complete alignment with their natural way. As I always say, your way is the best way. All that was happening was the dwelling in the presence of God. Again, I wasn't standing in front of the audience and saying, you are now dwelling in the presence of God. I didn't even have to use the word God. Presence of God, that still I am presence. Stillness, silence. And what happens is, as he had articulated, in the realization of the presence of God, there's no need to overcome, to destroy, or to do anything. I trust you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. While in flow in business, flow in conversation, flow in making videos, flowing, doing what you love to do, while in flow, there is no need to overcome, to destroy, or to do anything. Everything happens naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously. What you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say, happens effortlessly and naturally. That is the way. And if there's a seeming obstacle, a seeming something that needs to be overcome, you flow with it, through it, around it, naturally. Do you go through it? Do you go around it? Do you go above it? Do you go below it? Whatever. It happens naturally and effortlessly. Because as stated in Matthew 6, 7, and 8, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Now, this proves the point that these appearances, whatever it may be, people, environment, circumstance, and information, suggest nothing. Suggest nothing. It is only the person in mind, the individual in mind, that can suggest what these appearances seemingly suggest. To prove the point, while in flow, everything appears to be in harmony with you. The people, the environments, the circumstance, the information, everything appears to be in harmony with you. You appear to be in harmony with all these things. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added onto you. You witness the righteousness. Right time, right action, right this, right that. Everything is correct. Everything is absolutely perfectly aligned in flow. Joel Goldsmith said, "Begin your spiritual life with the understanding that all conflicts must be settled within your consciousness. There is never a conflict with person or condition, but rather a false concept mentally entertained about person, thing, circumstance, or condition. Therefore, make the correction within yourself rather than attempting to change anyone or anything in the without." And how do you do that? It's what he had articulated. In the realization of the presence of God. In the presence of God, the corrections happen. You don't need to try to figure out how to correct it. That's an interesting thing that I found on this journey. In the earlier stages, I would come up with concepts and theories and attempts to try to figure it out. And then at a particular point, I realized that dropping those conditions, would result in the way spontaneously naturally emerging while in flow. Everything spontaneously naturally happens. What you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say is spot on. I trust you notice this. Let's say you're having a conversation with someone. If the individual is stuck in their head and they're doing all this kind of mental stuff in their head and they're not present to the interaction with another individual, being present in the interaction with another individual, nuance point, is being in the presence of God, which is now and always now, and thus there is no other. Nuance point. Even though we can say, I speak with this other individual or this other person, in the presence of God, everything flows. What you say, what they say happens. And I don't judge by appearances. Why do I not judge by appearances? Because there is no condition in mind while in flow. There is no need to judge by appearances. If the individual is stuck in their head, then they may try to counter or do some kind of technique or whatever to try to manipulate the conversation. Not required. Everything flows. Everything flows. But the individual might say, for example, in sales, how do I come up with ways of overcoming an objection? If that information is required to contribute to your style, it emerges. But it does not throttle your style. Here's what I mean by this. I have for many years studied direct response marketing, copywriting, and consultative selling. These are areas that typically entrepreneurs study, and this helps with writing compelling emails, sales presentations, converting prospects into clients, and other kinds of activities that are communication-based, that are designed to facilitate the client relationship. Now, when done in a very mechanical way, it can come off as unnatural and manipulative. When done your style, which is the best style, it may have particular elements from what you had learned from books or programs or teachers, yet the real self shines forth naturally. It could even have ways that have never been done before. The real self can shine forth as ways that have never been done before. But if you've studied direct response marketing, copywriting, and consultative selling, and you know the principles behind it, you could, if you wanted to, see someone who is masterful at these areas, and maybe they never studied these areas. Maybe they studied these areas very little, and take what they're doing and not doing and fit it into the framework and say, oh yeah, of course this works because it fits with this best practice or that best practice or whatever. Yet all those things happen naturally and effortlessly. And I can honestly say they happen effectively. And this is not just in business relationships. This is also true for family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, and relating with people when you're out and about, and also the internet. Exactly what he said here. Begin your spiritual life with the understanding that all conflicts must be settled within your consciousness. So if there's ever a need to fight another person, to be in conflict with another person, just put off that former conversation, as stated in the Bible. Put off the former conversation. It belongs to the old man. By not identifying, which means feel the emotions being released. I had a conversation about this in our school community. If you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. It was a very precise question asking for an example of how to release one of these conditions in mind or concept in mind, as Joel had articulated. He said here, it is never a conflict with the person or condition, but rather a false concept mentally. So when I refer to condition, I refer to conditions placed upon consciousness in mind. So we can also refer to it and use it interchangeably in this context as false concepts placed upon consciousness in mind, entertained in a way that generates conflict. It manifests as physical conflict with another person. So he said there's never a conflict with a person, but rather a false concept. So the example that I gave is, let's say an individual gets triggered by what another person says. And this is an example from my own personal experience. I said, there was a time where it would get me very angry if people would talk about particular subjects. I'd get really triggered by it. And then I realized that that is not me. We are fundamentally in complete harmony with each other. I let you be, you let me be, and our relationship plays out wonderfully and harmoniously. So why do I need to get angry if they talk about this subject or that subject, unless I want to walk on eggshells? Now, they talk about whatever subject, and I would get angry about it. And then there would be this argumentation and conflict, trying to prove them wrong. They seemingly appeared to try to prove me wrong. And that is not an experience that I desire to have. If I'm honest with myself, I can say it. I can say, that's not the kind of relationship that I want. Maybe some people like that kind of relationship. That's up to them to decide. I personally like relationships where we can have wonderful conversations that are mutually harmonious. Not me stuck in my head or they're stuck in their head, none of that. Flow, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, as one. Now, we are in harmony with each other. How wonderful is that for personal relationships, business relationships, romantic relationships, when you're out and about connecting with people, etc. Wonderful. Now, let's say I would get angry when this person would bring up whatever topic. There was a condition in mind. It would trigger this emotional anger response. Body behaving in a particular way that would reflect that condition. Thoughts would appear in mind that would reflect the condition. And the theater would play out from that condition. And I know in that moment, I am not that condition. So the emotions, I allow them to be released. I feel them being released. I do not identify with those thoughts of us versus them. Body, I relax the body. then what happens is the conversation flows naturally. Now, let's say the next time they show up, they bring up that conversation again. I may notice a few things. Number one, it could be less triggering of that condition as that conditioning is dissolving. Less emotional charge around that conversation. Less troubling thoughts or intrusive thoughts. Body is calmer. As in, they can talk about that, and that's fine, or they don't talk about it. A whole bunch of times I find that they don't talk about that. Now, I personally have no preference in that regard, me personally, I don't have a preference. They could talk about it if they would like. They're my friends, and they could talk about whatever they want with me. My friendships are one where people can talk about absolutely anything they want to talk about with me. I will not shame and condemn, not by trying to not shame and condemn them. There is no conditioning in mine that results in shaming and condemning. Now, the result of that is wonderful friendships. They might even say things like, I don't have a lot of people in my life that I can honestly talk about this stuff with, because every time I bring it up, people tell me you shouldn't talk about that, or they try to ignore me, or they start arguing with me, when all I want to do is just share with somebody. And they say, you're a good friend because you listen. So we see the benefits of dropping the conditioning. Dropping the conditioning as it's the spiritual thing to do. Exactly like how he said. Make the correction within yourself rather than attempting to change anyone or anything in the without. What is the correction? The correction is happening in mind, the dissolving of the condition. So as mentioned, in the earlier stages, it may show up as less and less and less being triggered by that particular conversation or whatever it is, you name it. And then it's dissolved. Or it may dissolve right away. I personally recommend to acknowledge that one way is not better than another. Why? Because I've spoken to individuals where they said, oh, I did this once, the condition didn't dissolve, I was still triggered by it, there was still conflict, therefore I'm not perfect. And I say, this is not about perfectionism. You are that perfection beyond this need to do this or that in this perfectionism kind of way, never good enough. And I say, I value the steps, and I also value the end result. Or as I say sometimes, I value the journey and the destination, and I see them as one. Just like, for example, speed reading or learning efficiencies. You continuously get better at comprehension and retention. You continuously get better at direct response marketing, copywriting, consultative selling if you want to. Or another way of saying it from a metaphysical perspective, more of who you really are, the absolute perfection that you are, is appearing more so each moment, each day, with increasing frequency. It's unfolding more and more so. And I don't worry about how long it takes. He says, get back into yourself. So nothing is required to be done. You could do nothing to realize the self. The self is already realized. That which is witnessing all these things, prior to all these things, unconditional love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, toward all these things, is you fundamentally. That is you. Congratulations, you have realized the self. Now, the self and its real nature is shining forth with and as all these kinds of things, as we discussed recently. Real self-confidence, real self-charisma, real self-magnetism appearing more and more so. So another way of saying it is, more and more so, you appear to be more and more magnetic, as there is no limit to the degree of your magnetism. More and more so, you appear to be more confident, as there's no limit to the degree of your confidence. More and more so, you appear to be more charismatic, as there is no limit to your charisma. There is no limit. No matter how far you can imagine yourself to be, if you imagine yourself to appear to be charismatic or magnetic or confident in whatever way that looks like, there is more to you than that. Because I can assure you, you get to that point. I remember at one point imagining myself speaking publicly and people responding to me in this way that when I first imagined it back in the days, it was very far out. I did not know how that could happen. It was so beyond the current experiences that I was having at that time. And I remember when that happened. What also happened was that ability continued to manifest more so. The public speaking ability continued to manifest more so. My style, just as if you were to go about doing it, it would happen your style. And as mentioned, it may have some, let's call it best practices or ways that are related to how other people do it. But don't worry about those things. If the information was required, it would show up within my scope of awareness. It would show up as a video, it would show up as a post, or someone would mention it to me. Everything happens naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously in flow. Now, get back inside yourself means not stuck in your mind. It means I am that pure awareness which illumines the mind. Prior to thought, prior to the attempt to affirm that you are that, you are that. Pure awareness, that is perfection. Now, as he says, when living out from the center of being, you are untouched by the thoughts, opinions, laws, and theories of the world. I like that. You are untouched by the thoughts, opinions, laws, and theories of the world. You can really think for yourself now. Or you naturally really think for yourself. Or as I say sometimes, body naturally flows. Or what you say, what you don't say, everything happens naturally. Now, this was also articulated in the wonderful book, which I bring this up quite often. It's The Heavenly Life by James Allen. He said, the secret of life, of abundant life, with its strength, its felicity, and its unbroken peace, is to find the divine center within oneself, and to live in and from that, instead of in that outer circumference of disturbances, the clamors, cravings, and argumentations which make up the animal and intellectual individual. These selfish elements constitute the mere husks of life and must be thrown away by those who would penetrate to the central heart of things, to life itself. That is the divine center. That is the divine center from which all your perfection emerges more so from. That blows away these conditions in mind and the corresponding appearances that are associated to the conditions in mind also fall away or transform, however way you want to look at it, by grace and grace alone. You don't need to do this or that to convince yourself that you are that in the silence. You do nothing to know that you are that in the silence already. This is why I always say desire points to that, or desire points to being completely fulfilled. I am completely fulfilled as I exist as that fulfillment completely. That actually permeates the mind with thoughts that are related as you go about your day-to-day initiatives in relation to people. You start to think more lovingly, peacefully, or more and more of those thoughts appear. Body flows a lot more effortless and natural in conversation and communication when you're by yourself, etc. Emotions flow They are regulated. And a whole bunch of things happen in the neurology and body, and also the neurochemistry, which all spawn from that divine center. We can say that is healing to the mind, healing to the body, healing to your world. The presence of God is all that is required. It is the complete love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment that I was seeking for. It is the complete love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment you are seeking for, from which all these things spontaneously, naturally emerge. And there's no theory required for that. There's no technique required for that. There is no concepts required for that to be experienced in the body, in the mind, in life. As a matter of fact, it may start to dissolve those theories. It may start to dissolve those concepts. You no longer identify with them. They are no longer helpful for you. Maybe they were helpful in the earlier stages. Because as I mentioned, if you think that you need to do this or that to affirm that you are the person that you desire to be, or this or that to deny the appearances that seemingly suggest you are not the person you desire to be, and find at a particular point that these things are only providing temporary relief, maybe you feel better for 5 minutes, an hour or so, then knowing that, as stated in Matthew 6, 7, and 8, use not vain repetition, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him, is enormously freeing. That means whatsoever things I desire, I already am. I already have. That's it. Desire points to fulfillment. Anytime a desire arises, thank you, I am. You don't have to say thank you, I am. You can do that if you want. That desire brings you to the realization of the presence of God in the moment. So I'll say this again very precisely. Desire brings me to the realization of the presence of God. Desire brings me to stillness. I am that fulfillment. As I always say, you only desire to know and be as you are. Live freely. As you know that you're already that, everything happens naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously. And so we dissolve the conditioning to realize that we're already that. Because you're always that. Beyond all this conditioning, you're already that. You know that in the silence, as I mentioned. Not because I said so. You know that in the silence, as in the silence you are completely fulfilled. You are at peace. You experience love. You experience happiness, bliss, fulfillment, for no reason, beyond reason. That is the peace of God, the love of God, the happiness of God, the bliss of God, the joy of God. And it just naturally manifests as all these wonderful things. Or another way of saying it is you naturally share it with everyone. So in relationships, you share unconditional love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, more and more so as these conditions fall away. It plays out as wonderful relationships, personal life, business life, family life. In creative expressions, you infuse that love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, perfection that you are into your music, into your art, into your creative expression, into your words, the way you articulate, without trying. An example would be, let's use conversation. When you're having a conversation with someone, you're sharing, but there is absolutely no need for approval, validation, or confirmation of being that which you desire to be. Not in a forceful way. Not in an egotistical way. In a natural way. What I mean by that is it plays out your way, which is the best way, your style. Some individuals, they tend to be more animated, which is completely fine. With some individuals, they appear to be less animated, which is completely fine. Why? Because you play the perfect role. Because that is being on purpose. Being on purpose, you exist as that perfection. Being is you on purpose. And so what happens then is it plays out as what you say, what you don't say, how you say it, what you don't say, how you say it, how you don't say it. And also the fragrance of being, as mentioned, personal magnetism, charisma, confidence, and also all these things added, which are the accessories of being. How you dress, how you carry yourself, the kind of car you drive, etc. And you're not looking around to say, oh, this person drives this other car, therefore they're better than me. Or this person lives in the wilderness and does not have possessions, and they're happy, therefore I need to do that in order to be happy. You live your natural way. Because the Father knows what you need before you ask. So your way emerges. And let's say you'll see somebody living that way, either one of those ways. For example, I tend to sit down and watch YouTube videos on my TV in the evening, and I'll just browse sometimes whatever's showing up on my algorithm. So once in a while, I'll get videos of people living in ways that I have never seen before. And I can tell that that is their natural way of living, all different kinds of ways. Some people living in different countries, different kind of lifestyles, and I can tell that they genuinely love living those ways. And back in the days, based on condition, I would have thought, I need to do what they're doing. I need to live how they're living. I need to drive those cars, or I need to not drive those cars if they sold or got rid of a whole bunch of material possessions to live more minimal. I need to do that in order to be happy. The answer is depends. Listen to yourself. You trust yourself. Really think for yourself. What they're displaying is their style, which is their best style. And that is what I love. I love to see people be as they are. Being as they are, what happens is how they talk, what they say, how they dress, and the accessories of being, the lifestyle, etc., is their style, which is their best style. So I love watching those kinds of videos. Those people inspire us to be more of who we are. They're living their style, which is their best style. And it's not like they're saying, hey, you got to live this way. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Matthew 7:16. You shall know them by their fruits. So, the fruits from the tree of life are your style of fruits, your ways of doing things, which are naturally added onto you by grace and grace alone. So that is what is meant by your Father knows before you ask. And you'll prove the point. You'll see your own fruits emerge in the presence of God. All those, as he had said, the need to overcome, destroy, or do anything dissolves. Now, physically, it can appear as the individual way as well. So this does not mean that the individual does not do things physically. What they do, what they don't do, happens naturally in flow. In entrepreneurship, one entrepreneur runs a business where they dedicate 5 or 6 hours a day to their business, or 10 hours a week for their business. And that's their business model. That's their style. And they do whatever with their life afterwards. Some entrepreneurs love what they do, and they dedicate from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday to Friday, maybe 6 days a week in their business, and they absolutely love what they do. Is one business model better than another business model? The answer of the business model depends on the individual style. Now, the question may be, what is my individual style? I can assure you, the individual style emerges in the presence of God. It naturally emerges. Ideas, hunches, plans are received within, as stated in Think and Grow Rich. I remember this back in the days. He said that, and it is true. My style started to emerge. My way of doing things started to emerge. All these fruits, the consciousness bliss, the consciousness happiness, are emerging. And we experience them where else can you experience the fruits apart from consciousness? You experience it in consciousness. All these things are appearing here in consciousness. So thus, along the way, and let's say if the intention is wonderful relationships, Or also the intention is wonderful business and then relationships along the way to be harmonious. As he had said, there's never a conflict with a person or condition, but rather a false concept mentally entertained about the person, thing, circumstance, or condition. Therefore, make the correction within yourself rather than attempting to change anyone or anything in the without. So I gave the example of how I did it and also what I shared in the school community. Again, if you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. It's if the thought is about to become identified with of conflict toward another person, which is a reactive response from a condition. Do not identify with it. Allow the emotions to be released. They eventually release. You don't identify with the thoughts. And then you're less identified with that condition. You can say it that way, because if it were to happen again, you feel more at ease about it. And then you repeat that again and again till it's gone. And with some individuals, they just drop it right away and it's gone. And I would not compare, well, this other person can drop it right away and it takes me a while. Drop that, because that's another condition, which I found if identified with generates more suffering. Drop that as well. Because the point of life is God, that's it. The presence of God is all we desire to dwell in, to witness all these fruits added onto us, whatsoever things we desire added onto us by grace and grace alone in flow. So same with thoughts. I don't identify with the thoughts. Allow the emotions to be released, body, relax. That's it. That's how you, as he mentioned here, get back inside yourself. It is abiding in the presence of God, because as the emotions are released, as the thoughts are no longer identified with, as the world is no longer identified with based on condition, what remains, or another way of saying it is, what eternally always existed prior to all these things is God alone. As the perfection, peace, love, happiness, joy, what the individual was seeking for. So they find it within each time these kinds of things happen. They find it within, and that is how you practically make the correction, rather than attempting to change anyone or change anything in the without. Those things get taken care of by grace and grace alone. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You can say, I know that I am that prior to all these things. I always remember that I am that beyond all these things. I never forget that I am that beyond all these things, from which everything appears to be in harmony with me. People, environment, circumstance, information appears to be in harmony with me, as all fundamentally is as I am, that infinite love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, appearing more so with increasing frequency on a continuous basis as far as the senses perceive. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.